There has been huge interest in the Hyundai Ioniq 5 so far, but to see if it's really a game-changing EV or not, we're putting it up against one of its outstanding main rivals, the Tesla Model 3.
And in this review, we're comparing these cars inside, outside, on the road. We're crunching all the numbers to pick a winner. But before we start, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. And if you want a great deal on your next new car, click on the link to go to whatcar.com. First, let's cover the basics. The Ioniq 5 is a new electric hatchback, which is very similar to the Kia EV6. And if you want to watch our EV6 review, then just click on the link at the top of the screen there. Now, this car has received so much attention, mainly because of how it looks. So it's got loads of cool design features like these pixel lights, and it manages to be retro and futuristic all at the same time. It's available with two different batteries. There's a smaller one and a bigger one, which is the one that we've got here today. And if you do go for the bigger battery with rear-wheel drive, then the WLTP official claimed range is up to 298 miles. This is the Tesla Model 3. Now, it's already a few years old, but it had a mild facelift towards the end of last year, and it still is at the very sharp end of what modern EVs can offer. In fact, it's the best electric car that you can buy. But to test whether it still is, we're putting it up against the Ioniq 5 in standard range plus form, which just about undercuts the Ioniq in terms of price, even though it can't actually travel as far on a full charge, officially at least, but we're going to be testing the ranges in this video review as well. But we want to know what you think of the styling of both of these cars. Do you prefer the looks of the Model 3 or the Ioniq 5? Make sure you tell us in the comments below.
And by the way, just after we finished filming this review, the Standard Range Plus left the Model 3 lineup, being replaced by a new entry-level version simply called Rear-Wheel Drive. It's very similar to the Standard Range Plus, but with a bigger battery and a better range. We'll be reviewing it soon, so make sure you subscribe to find out exactly what's new. But for now, here's how the Model 3 and Ioniq 5 compare inside.
Now, the Model 3 has had some changes since it first went on sale in the UK, and we go deep into what all those changes are in our full review of this car, which you can watch by clicking on the link at the top of the screen there. But for this comparison test, basically, the main change to point out on this interior is the fact that it doesn't have the gloss black center console finish from before. And it's actually all the better for it because it helps lift the interior quality of this car, and generally it is better than when we first saw the Model 3 in this country. What hasn't changed is the fact that this is basically a minimalist interior to the extreme. So there's hardly any buttons, there's not even a driver display, and instead that's all on the touchscreen infotainment system here, which isn't ideal, but you do at least have the important numbers in the top right corner of the screen, so they are close to the driver. You also still have these buttons and dials on the steering wheel, which can control the mirrors and also the steering wheel itself, which is weird. This dual screen layout in the Ioniq 5 looks pretty cool, doesn't it? But what do you think? Do you think this actually looks better than the Model 3's interior? Tell us in the comments below. The disappointment here though is that in the Ioniq 5 you might think it looks cool, but the materials don't feel plush to touch. So there's quite a lot of hard plastics around, and also there's quite a lot of wobble in this center console too. And really all these materials just feel a bit cheap, which is a big disappointment on a car that costs about £40,000. The Model 3's interior isn't perfect, but there's more soft touch materials around, so ultimately it does feel better in terms of quality. The Model 3 also has a better range of adjustment in its steering wheel, because in the Ioniq 5 you do just wish that the steering wheel came out a little bit further than it does, whereas the Model 3 has a better extension on offer. Now, with both cars, the seats are comfortable for the most part, but they are just lacking a little bit in side support. So if you're going around a corner quickly, then it does just feel like you're about to slip out of the seat in both cars. But in the Ioniq 5, every version that you buy looks like this inside. So that means that you get a 12.3-inch touchscreen infotainment system with decent graphics, a nice simple layout that's also quite responsive as well. And you also have some physical shortcut buttons down here to hop between the different menus easily. And this button is programmable, and if you hit that, then it takes you to your most used screen, which is pretty useful to have.
But it's the Tesla which has the better system. The 15-inch screen is really bright and sharp, and the software is much slicker. But with so much control through the screen, these icons are a little small, which is fine for your passenger, but a bit fiddly if you're the driver. You get Netflix, some games, there's Google Maps, there's no Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, but this system is so good that you don't really miss them.
As we said earlier, the Model 3 doesn't have a digital driver display. The Ioniq 5 does. It's got this massive screen there, but the big problem with it is that the important numbers, how fast you're going, how much range is left, are out towards the edges of the screen. So from where I've got the steering wheel set up, I can't actually see them. And for lots of people, they might just find that they need to have the wheel unnaturally high in order to be able to see those two crucial numbers, which is a bit of a shame. But the general view out of the Ioniq 5 is pretty good, and it's actually better out the front than it is in the Tesla, because with the Model 3, you've got quite thick front pillars, whereas in the Ioniq 5, they're slimmer here. But overall, all things considered, the Model 3 is better up front. Space in the back of the Tesla is similar to what you'd find in something like a BMW 3 Series. In terms of space, there's certainly room enough for a couple of 6-footers to get comfortable. And it does also feel like quite an open and airy interior as well. But the Ioniq 5 is bigger. Legroom especially is really generous. Headroom also good, and these rear seats, they slide and they recline as standard. So it really is impressive back here. But in the battle of the boots, it's the Model 3 which is the clear winner. You can fit 9 of these carry-on size suitcases into its massive boot, which also has loads of underfloor storage, and you can even get another suitcase in its front trunk. And because this is the facelifted Model 3, you now have an electric tailgate. The Ioniq 5 can fit 7 of these suitcases into its shallower boot, and while you do still have some underfloor storage, which is enough for the charging cables, it's nowhere near what's on offer in the Model 3, and the same goes for the space under the bonnet too. But this is still a practical EV. Now, how do these two cars compare on the road? Well, if you know anything about Tesla, then you'll know that they make pretty quick cars. This Model 3 Standard Range Plus is the least rapid Tesla that you can buy, but it will still hit 60 miles per hour from a standstill in a pretty quick 5.3 seconds. That's with a 329 brake horsepower electric motor driving the rear axle.
The Ioniq 5 we've got here is all-wheel drive, but really the one to go for is the rear-wheel drive version. That has a 214 brake horsepower motor and is quite a bit heavier than the Tesla, so 0 to 60 miles per hour is done in 6.9 seconds. But that really still feels more than quick enough for any type of regular driving. But it's range rather than speed which is likely to be more important to most people. And the rear-wheel drive version of the Ioniq 5, with the bigger of the two batteries in its lineup, can officially do 298 miles on a full charge. And the Standard Range Plus version of the Model 3, which has the smallest battery capacity in its lineup, can do 278 miles.
But we conducted some tests in a controlled environment, simulating real-world roads and real-world driving, and with a Standard Range Plus Model 3 and a rear-wheel drive 73 kilowatt-hour Ioniq 5, it was the Model 3 which was much more efficient. It averaged 4.2 miles per kilowatt-hour of electricity compared to the Ioniq 5's 3.4 miles per kilowatt-hour. So that gives a theoretical maximum range of 214 miles for the Model 3 because it's got a smaller battery, compared with 247 miles with the bigger battery Ioniq 5.
But don't forget there's now a new entry-level version of the Model 3 which gets a bigger battery than the Standard Range Plus. We haven't conducted a real-world range test on it yet, but it gets an impressive WLTP claimed range of 305 miles.
The Model 3 has a clear advantage when it comes to charging up, because if you buy a Tesla, then you get access to Tesla's fantastic supercharger network. And from one of those, you'll get a 10 to 80% charge in around 21 minutes. But the Ioniq 5 has a really impressive maximum charging rate of 220 kilowatts, so it can theoretically charge its much larger battery from 10 to 80% in just 18 minutes. The only problem is you need a 350 kilowatt public charger to actually achieve that. And right now in the UK, there are only 20 different locations capable of offering that. So there will be more in future, but it's going to be a while before it's as good and as common as Tesla's supercharger network. Now, loads of people love Teslas because of lots of the wacky things that are included with the cars, like games and fart noises. and various different Easter eggs in the infotainment system. But the Ioniq 5 has some of its own interesting features too. Like this adapter, which allows you to basically turn the Ioniq 5 into an actual power source. So you can plug this in and charge your laptop. You can even charge another electric car, but pretty slowly because this only has the power of a 3-pin plug, remember. And you can even use it to boil a kettle.
That adapter is only standard on Ultimate trim though. You need to pay £365 to get it on other trims, so you might be better off investing in a thermos flask.
The Ioniq 5 is also available with an augmented reality head-up display, which shows things like route guidance as if it's projected directly onto the road in front of you. But it's only available in range-topping Ultimate trim. The Model 3 doesn't get a head-up display at all.
The Ioniq 5 also gets Highway Drive Assist Level 2. This is adaptive cruise control with lane keep assist, and it will also overtake cars for you, which is essentially what Tesla's so-called autopilot does. Entry-level SE Connect cars don't get that overtaking function in the Ioniq 5, and it doesn't have the apparently future-proofed full self-driving function that Tesla offers.
As part of the technology pack for £1,495, you can get fully reclining front seats, but you can only add that expensive option on the already expensive Ultimate trim. And this is a premium trim car, so it doesn't have it. Now, whichever car has the best quirky features might genuinely be a deal breaker for some people, but surely what's more important is how these cars drive. So if you value a soft, supple ride, then the Ioniq 5 is definitely the one to go for. It's got a really nice ride that does well to smother most bumps, but it can get a bit bouncy and floaty on fast, undulating roads. But this isn't a great car to drive quickly. The nose is quite slow to respond to steering inputs, and then when the car does change direction, there's quite a lot of body leaning. But it is comfortable, and to go with that, it's quiet in here as well. Straight away in the Model 3, you can tell that the Ioniq 5 is the smoother choice of the two cars. This has got quite firm suspension, so impacts over potholes are felt pretty sharply. But the upshot of that firm suspension is that compared to the Ioniq 5, this feels much more agile, if that's important to you. Now, when it comes to the pricing, the Ioniq 5 costs from around £37,000. That's for the smaller battery with the smaller range. But it goes up to £48,000 for the most expensive model, which then has the bigger battery with the bigger range. The version that we've got here sits somewhere in the middle of that pricing. So it gets the bigger battery, but it's in the cheaper of the two trims available. This actually has all-wheel drive, but we think unless you absolutely have to have it, the sweet spot of the Ioniq 5 range is a rear-wheel drive version with the 73 kilowatt-hour battery in premium trim. And that version of this car costs around £42,000. That midpoint of the Ioniq lineup is where the Model 3 starts. So from around £41,000, you get a Model 3 Standard Range Plus, and the lineup goes up to almost £60,000 for a Model 3 Performance. But just like the Ioniq, it's the Model 3 in the middle of its lineup which makes the most sense. So for a Model 3 long range, you get a long range and an overall fantastic electric car. And the long range is definitely worth it over the Standard Range Plus because it just generally feels like a more polished car and definitely has a better ride. But which of these two cars is best? Well, if you've taken one look at the Ioniq 5 and you've thought, that's the electric car for me, then the good news is that the really interesting styling is backed up by what is a very good electric car. If you go for our favourite version, you get a near 250-mile range. It's really comfortable, it's got a practical interior, and it has that super fast charging ability. But that isn't quite enough to beat the Model 3. It's more fun to drive, it offers brilliant performance, it's a bit nicer inside. So it's the Model 3 which claims victory here. But the Ioniq 5 is still a very good electric car. And if you want even more information on both these cars, then go to whatcar.com, where you can also get a great saving on your next new car. Just click on the link and you can go straight to all of our deals. But before you go, tell us in the comments below, which of these two cars would you have? And make sure to subscribe to our channel.